Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Rachel Pfeiffer. Rachel is a psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and the founder of the Embodied Mind Collective. She holds an undergraduate degree in psychology and philosophy and a master's in counseling and psychotherapy. Blending clinical insight with somatic wisdom, Rachel draws from internal family systems, somatic therapy, and nearly a decade of yoga teaching to help clients regulate their nervous systems, process emotions, and reconnect with their inner voice. Her work bridges science and spirituality through therapy, retreats, and workshops, guiding people beyond overthinking and into grounded, intentional living. Now, Rachel and I share a lot of similar passions. So when she said yes to coming on the show, I was beyond excited. And with that, I would love to welcome you into the space. Rachel, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you today?
Hi, Ash. I am phenomenal. I feel very energized. I feel excited and I feel like hungry to dive in. I mean, you and I just had a little preamble before we hit record and I was like, "Oh, yes." You know how like when you go on a first date and you're like, "Yes, like the vibe is feeling good." So
The vibe is vibing. Yes. And that was the first time we'd actually really met, which is what I
Mm,
love so much about podcasting. It's,
mhm,
you came across my pages on Instagram, which is awesome. I was like, this girl's a vibe. I love what she's about.
mm.
Started consuming your content and just your authenticity radiates through the page,
Oh.
through the screen. So I cannot wait for people to get to experience you on an auditory level as well today. But yeah, I just knew from an instant. So the fact that we've managed to hit it off, thank goodness. You never know.
Yeah,
Sometimes it can
yeah.
get really awkward.
I
Sometimes
mean,
I
it's
get
still
people,
early.
who knows? All of a sudden we're wrapping things up quite
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
But no, I'm super excited. So thank you so much for your time today. So let's kick things off with some nice, easy questions to begin. I'd love for you to share with our audience, Rachel, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Okay, where do I live? I am a Sydney girl, and I'm very, very proud of it. I love the city that I live in. And oh wait, you're from Melbourne, aren't you?
Yes, but I did live in Sydney for 8 years.
Okay, I was going to say because I know there's like some sibling rivalry over here, but but I'm from Sydney. An average day, I start by getting woken up by my dash hound at 7 a.m. with some very aggressive licks on the face. I try and get my butt to a Pilates class or a yoga class. Um, and then I will head into my office in North Sydney and I'll sit down with anywhere from 4 to 6 clients. Um, and then I will wrap up my day by sitting down on the couch with my husband, who's also a psychotherapist and a yoga teacher, and debriefing. Right now, we're watching Severance, or we're watching couples
Ooh.
therapy, which is actually a really terrible way to wind down from a day of being a therapist. Like watching more therapy, I would not recommend that. But yeah, and then lots of moments of gratitude and mindfulness and connection sprinkled in. Lots of voice notes from girlfriends in between clients, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I love that. That sounds like a perfect
Mm.
day. Where do you find time for fun? Running your own. I mean, there's so much in that. Where does the fun live?
That's such an interesting question that I've actually been playing with. I got really burnt out at the end of last year, and burnout is it's a pattern for me. And I burn out not because I can't structure my life, but because I love what I do so much. I find it really hard to put it down at times.
Mm.
Um, and I got really burnt out at the end of last year. And what really came through to me is that I need to I obviously need to rest. For the work that I do, rest is not a luxury, it's a requirement. If I want to be present and attuned in the way that I want to be and I need to be to do the job that I want to do, um, I need to be, I need to make sure that fill up my cup, so to speak. And within that, I also realize that rest is not always just lying down horizontally. Sometimes rest is play, and for me, um, I think the importance of play and the importance of fun it's a really fun thing that I'm playing with now. Like I love I love novelty. I like trying things that really test me. I like doing things that aren't serious because so much of my
Mm.
job is so serious and so focused. So it's actually really nice to like go and what have we been doing? We love going to like arcades, like how we would go in school.
Stop. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I am the same.
I love it.
I
I love
love
it.
an arcade.
Mm-hmm.
Froth.
Mm-hmm.
Froth on an
I love it.
arcade.
And like, it's so funny. Like, I'm the most uncoordinated person in the world, but I'm weirdly good. And I don't want to brag, but I'm weirdly good at arcade basketball. And so I love, and my husband, like 6'3", athletic his whole life. I beat him every single time. So that actually feels
Yes, you
really
do.
healing and restorative for me.
We love
in
this.
between therapy sessions. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I have my best friend Georgia, who she lives in Germany. Everyone who listens to the show knows about Georgia. When she comes back to Australia to visit once a year, we always go to arcades because we've known each other since we were 7-8 years old. So we really bring out this inner child in one another. And if it's not an arcade, it's a bowling alley. Like we went to Luna Park recently when she came back. Like we love to play and have fun. And it's just the best, isn't it?
It's just, I think it takes us back to a time where, I don't know, it was so easy and uncomplicated to access joy. That just like presence and play and movement just feels like inherently pleasurable and joyful. It's so easy, and yeah, I love it. Arcade, bowling alley, I'm with you there, girl. Yeah.
Amazing. That's awesome. All right. Well, I think we should dive into your photo, Rachel. I've asked you to bring in a photo today from a time in your life where you are hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself externally to the outside world, but internally, the outsides and the insides, they weren't matching. Maybe you were struggling. Could you please describe for our audience the photo that I'm bringing up on the screen now? What are we looking at here? And what was going on for you at that time in your life?
So the photo is of me on vacation. I'm in my bikini and I've got some random street cat from Thailand in my hands that I've picked up and forced to take a photo with me. And the cat is very disgruntled. And I think in that photo, smile plastered on my face. I'm having fun. There's novelty, all that kind of stuff that you have when you're on vacation. But that photo could not possibly capture what was actually happening inside of me because, gosh, probably 3 days prior to that photo being taken, I had received news that I had been swept up in this pretty horrendous court case. It's a bit of a long story. I'm more than happy to dive into it.
Absolutely. We've got the time.
Okay.
If you would feel safe to do so, I'd love you to share.
For sure. So it was the night before we were flying out for a big international trip. We were going to go and do different parts of Asia. And a girlfriend of mine who I used to work with at a bar back when I was at university sent me a message and she said, "Hey, can I call you?" And my brain went in one of three ways. I was like, all right, she's either pregnant, she's either getting divorced, or she has cancer. Like immediately, that's where my mind went because, it was a bit weird that she wanted to call me. We're not like at that kind of level of, closeness. And so I was like, yeah, sure, like call away. And my money really was on that she was pregnant. And so when she called, I was like, hi, you. Like, like I was like, go on. And she was like, hey, are you alone? And I was like, oh, shit, it's cancer. Like, immediately I was running through the options. And she was like, I don't really know how to say this, but back in, what was, God, it's so complex, but let me try and just put the pieces back together. In 2021, she had received an email from an anonymous email address that said, hi, Hannah, there is this website of you that I think you need to see. Here is the link. And that was it. Now, obviously, if you ever receive an email like that, you don't click it. Like it's spam,
of course,
it's phishing, like it's dangerous. And so she just continued. It kept coming and she kept continuing to delete it. And then one night, she was having a few wines with her fiance. It's in the middle of lockdown. The email came through and they were like, oh, fuck it, let's open it. And what they opened was a forum that had pages and pages and pages and pages of essentially rape porn, kind of created about my friend. And when she was, actually, I don't even know how they found it, but it connected her, or I think it suggested her to my page. So her page was called The Destruction of Grundy, and my page was called Let's Rape Rachel.
Oh
And it
my
was the same thing.
goodness.
This person had taken all of our images from social media and used AI to turn them into, a lot of graphic sexual scenes. Some of them were very graphic and degrading and dehumanizing and violent. Some of them weren't. Some of them he would just post a picture that was completely unedited, but he would encourage people to comment on them and say, what is it that you would like to do to this girl? And I'm editing the way that was written, essentially. And there would just be, between all of these pages, there would just be hundreds of comments of like very graphic scenes of sexual assault, essentially. And this happened not only to me, not only to Hannah, to another friend of ours, but then also he had another page where it wasn't specifically dedicated to one woman, but it was just kind of, he would pop up a bunch of other people. And my friend had become a detective, and they had gone through Facebook, and they said, okay, there's a page to Rachel, there's a page to this person, there's a page to this person, this person, features. And they essentially looked for the one mutual friend that we all had on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were able to kind of narrow it down to a few people. And they took all of this evidence to the police. And long story short, nothing happened. So after 6 months of waiting for something to happen, of constantly calling the police station, asking for an update, my friend received a call and said, like, essentially, we're not closing the case, but we're pausing it. Nothing's going to happen. So my friend was required to go and pay for her own private investigator and pay for lawyers as well, that pretty much said, look, we've pulled IP addresses, like we've tracked it down to this one specific person. You have to go in, essentially, like it's a open and shut case at this point. The case was reopened and the person was arrested, and that person was our old boss from when we used to work at the bar together. Back in 2017 or so. And it's so funny. We often joke, like, we had a few bosses, and it was not the boss that we would have anticipated, put it that way. He was so sweet, and he was so kind.
You're kidding.
And I wasn't super close with him, but my friends were. He had attended engagement parties, and he had been there. My friends had been at his mother's funeral with him. Like, there was a real friendship and a real closeness there. And so it was an extreme violation, and just shocking. I think that was the part that was the scariest, that we wouldn't have picked him. So there was this real feeling of, I thought I knew someone, and
yes,
they had this complete, kind of double life. And so he was arrested, court cases went back and forth, and eventually we had our day in court. And it was quite an unprecedented crime, because the charges that he was kind of charged with they weren't adequate to capture what he had done and how he had used AI, because we were yet to kind of have laws that reflected altering images in this way using AI. And so he was sentenced to 9 years in jail, 5 years non-parole, and it was a pretty landmark decision, because we're only at the beginning of these crimes starting to happen. And I think this was one of the first cases where someone had been charged for doing this.
Mm. Wow. I'm still blown away. Number one, that he had the capacity to do that.
Mm.
And to think that this person was somebody who had been in your orbit, that you had known. I think it is really even more jarring, the fact that he was so lovely and so unassuming, because that really does mess with you psychologically, doesn't it? Because then you start to question, well, who else in my life
Yep.
is showing up one way and is a completely different person behind closed doors? Without me putting my words in your mouth, Rachel, what was the trauma? I mean, it's obvious,
Yeah.
outwardly, but what did it do to you internally? Was it your sense of safety? Was it
Mm.
your self-esteem? What was rattled by this experience?
Mm. I think for everyone who was in the case, they had a different experience. Like I said, I wasn't so close to him, so it was less of the kind of the betrayal of friendship. For me, as a part of the legal proceedings, we had to identify ourselves in the photos. So we had to see what was on that page. And
Mm.
I think what was most traumatic was seeing my body, which I have always had a really healthy, beautiful relationship with. Like I've always really felt comfortable in my body, felt comfortable in my sexuality and my sensuality and the way I show up in the world. To see that version of me so thwarted and experienced through the lens of such hatred and degradation and violence, it felt as though I was experiencing my body differently. Like this thing that I had loved so much had been taken and twisted and spat back out.
Mm.
And I think, I work a lot, in this work, I work a lot with, trauma and assault. But I think just the persistence of it, like seeing just how many people co-signed this and commented and got on board. And again, like I'm mindful of being sensitive to your listeners, but the depths of the deprivation that he went to. I mean, we're talking bestiality. Like it got bad. It got really, really bad. So I think just witnessing just how dark someone's mind can be and how they project that onto your body. I mean, it took work and I got there, but it was really hard for me to not internalize that. It took a
Mm.
long time for me to hand back what was his and come back to mine. But essentially, there was probably a good 18 months, 2 years where I felt it was really difficult to be in my body. And specifically, it was really difficult to be in my sensuality. It felt unsafe.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what has been the journey for you to step back in and feel safe within your body and feel safe to express your sensuality again? What was the journey that you took yourself on to get there?
Mm. It's multifaceted. I think the first place that it showed up was obviously in my relationship with my husband. I mean, how could it not? So one of the things that we did was go to couples therapy, and learn how to relate to each other in this space, in this context. Another thing that I did that was surprisingly helpful was get into tantric yoga. Now, not the kind of tantric yoga that I'm sure everyone's mind went to, like not
Yeah.
Kama Sutra style. Um, Tantra is about like, oh gosh, how would you even describe it? What I did is I started to come back to quite literally my senses. Because a lot of the time what happens in trauma is that there's such an overwhelming experience in the body, like such a feeling of not feeling safe, of feeling shut down or feeling exposed. And when the body doesn't feel safe, we retreat up into the head. And so it was about gently learning that it was safe for me to come back into my body. And it didn't even need to be sexually. It means can I taste my food? Like, can I slow down and feel the sweetness of my tea or the heat of the soup that I'm eating? Can I feel like my fingers running down my skin? Can I feel the softness of the fabric that sits on my skin? So I started to give my body experiences where it felt safe, it felt pleasurable to be in my body. So Tantra was a really big and beautiful part of this journey, and a fun one as well, I'm not going to lie. And another thing I did that I think was the most pivotal was breath work. I so crazy. When we were in court, it was broken up into 2 days. One of the days I was in court, which was a long day, and then the next day I was actually not able to attend because I was at my breathwork teacher training. I was learning how to be a breathwork facilitator. So I'm like on Zoom listening to this court case, listening to this man get sentenced, and then running back into the classroom to learn how to do breathwork. And it was actually perfect timing because breathwork is such a big release. And I remember breathing, and it's so interesting. There were 2 parts that were really transformative for me. The first is I was really processing what it was like to sit next to him during this court case, because he was, maybe like 2 meters away from me. I don't know. It felt like 30 centimeters, but he was closer than I would have liked. And I could see him the whole time. And I remember sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and my body just being in such excruciating pain, like particularly my legs, my whole thighs were cramping and my knee joints were aching. And when I was breathing, my legs started to shake. And when I got curious about it, I was like, when I was sitting near him, my body wanted to run, but it couldn't. And so my body is now having that release of wanting to run and wanting to move. And I could feel quite literally the energy move out of my legs, which for me, I've studied somatic experiencing. It made it so tangible and real. Like it took it from like, okay, I've read the books and I understand it, to like, oh, okay, no, I get it now. I get that energy physically needs to move out of the body. So that was the first part. The second part was I saw him sitting in the box when he was in court. And so I'm breathing and I have this visual of him over there. And I saw this like almost like black cloud, almost like a gremlin hovering over him. And it was like this shame gremlin. And like a cloud, it came over to all of us, because all of us girls were sitting together, and it rained down on us. And he infected us with his shame, that he has such a thwarted sense of self. Clearly, if he's doing this, if he's doing this, and he recruited us into his drama, so to speak. He wanted to project his shame, his sexual insecurities, his feeling of deficiency in himself, and he projected it onto us. And we got recruited in a way that we never consented to. And so in this breath work, as I breathed, it was like I was breathing the shame out of me. Like I was collecting all the little raindrops out of my body, and I was like pushing it out of my mouth, and I handed it back to him. And I said, that's yours. This has nothing to do with me. Like your insecurity, your complex relationship with your masculinity, your sexuality that is so wrapped up and defined by this depravity, that's not mine. And I'm going to hand it back to you. And what I actually felt for him was a deep sense of love, like a deep sense, and sincerely, like not in like a gaslight, like forgive your abusers kind of way, but I saw him for the little boy that he was, for the little boy that felt small and misunderstood and was in pain and didn't know how to deal with it, and found this outlet online where he could manage these deep feelings of insecurity and smallness. And my heart broke for him. I felt compassion. And I think it felt so whole and so complete. like when I talk about it now and people ask me like, how are you? And I'm like, I feel like the circle has been like, it's been closed. There's a full stop. I take a full exhale. Like there's space here. It feels complete. And I think going into the body, going into the relational stuff, and going into the psychology of it really helped me to move through it in a way that's felt really palatable.
Thank you so much for sharing, and for sharing the ways in which you navigated the healing, because I think that's the most important part, isn't it? That you took ownership and took your power back and took responsibility. Even though it wasn't your fault that it happened, you took responsibility to heal yourself in that moment, which is such a powerful message. So thank you for sharing that, Rachel. I'm curious to know, you studied psychology before then moving into counseling and psychotherapy. I'd love to know, because many of my friends who have studied in this space have told me, have shared with me, that there were parts of themselves that they were looking to heal, a lot of the time subconsciously, that led them towards this path, this vocation. Is that the same for you? Can you identify areas maybe perhaps within your childhood that anchored you into wanting to do this work?
That's a great question. The first time I wanted to be a therapist, I was 11. My parents had divorced, and my mum, in her infinite wisdom, had taken us, or me and my siblings, to go and see a therapist just to see how we were adjusting and dealing with the very big shift. And I remember this therapist, gosh, she taught me about push-pull dynamics with my brother, which essentially means I wanted my brother to like me, but I was a little sister and he wanted nothing to do with me. So what did I do? I got close to him. Like I annoyed him. I got in his face. I was like, hey, like I'm going to come to the park with you guys. And he was like, piss off. No, you're not. And she essentially told me that you need to give people space in order to be able to come to you. That if you're constantly like chasing them, you're actually forcing them to move away. Now, like, as I say this now, like it's self-evident, like obviously like suffocating people's not a great tactic to getting them to hang out with you. But at the age of 11, this was like magic. I was like, oh my God, I can change my behavior in a way that gets me closer to what I want. Like this is like wizardry. Like, and I need to know more of this. And I felt empowered. I wouldn't have called it that at the time. I probably just felt happy. And it was at that point I was like, whoever that witch is that I just spoke to, like I want to do that and I want to be her. And so from that age, I was like, okay, I want to be a therapist. And then I went to study. And I remember so clearly, we did a class and one of our teachers said, why do you guys want to be a therapist? It was one of our first days. And everyone's like, I want to help. I want to care for the less fortunate. I've been there before and I know how much, we suffer. And I just want to give to people in a way that I didn't have. And he was like, wow, this is really beautiful. And you're all full of shit, essentially. And I was like, go on. And he was saying, we tell these stories of altruism that we just want to give back. And I'm sure that is true. Like, undoubtedly, there is a part of us that feels good about contributing to the larger whole. But I think there is, and this was his point, there is always going to be a self-serving element. For a lot of us, we were primed to be helpers. We've played the role of therapist for our parents from a young age. Well, that's not my story, but a lot of people have landed in this work as a, how would I say it? Landing into this work is almost inevitable given the story that had been written prior, the roles that they had been put in. And I think if I'm really honest with myself, the appeal was this. I was the youngest sibling, which meant I was always like the one that knew the least. I had all of these older siblings who knew more and had more experience, and I wanted to hang out and I was included, and I wanted a voice. I wanted people to care about what I said. So sure, I'll put myself in a position where people will pay me to get my insight. I mean, it really like healed that wound of not being important, not being listened to, not never being consulted. So that was definitely a part of it. But I also think it's so funny. Like, you work from this wound and then you get the thing. I'm like, great, now people are coming to me. And then you're like, well, I got what I wanted, and now you can all leave me alone. It's been able to shift into
Totally.
something much, much healthier. Just FYI. Yeah.
And tell me, what was then the journey from psychology to psychotherapy? And for people listening today who perhaps don't know the difference, I'd love for you to touch on it, because I've always seen a psychotherapist. It's ever since going to rehab, that's who I was put together with at the time. And I adore psychotherapists. I have seen psychologists as well, but for me, psychotherapy is my jam. But I feel like most people I speak to they just think it's psychology, and that's who you go see. And because of the Medicare rebates and all the way that our system is structured here in Australia, I feel like so many people are missing out on, and I'm going to get shot for this, but like real true therapy.
Preach, sister.
Controversial, I know.
I mean, I'm always way more like PC when I explain it, but yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I could see like the aggressive animacy when you talked about how much you love your therapist. You're like, oh, like it's just yeah. Okay, it's so funny. The number one question I always get when I tell people I'm a psychotherapist is, what's a psychotherapist? The way that I can explain it is, I'm essentially like a cousin to a psychologist. Like, we're in a very similar family. We're looking at mental health. We're looking at personal development. We're working in relationship for self-improvement. The difference is this. Psychologists tend to work with the kind of medical model of understanding humans and understanding behavior, that it's almost as though we're taking the way that we look at illness in the body, in the way that we do in medicine, and applying that to the mind. Like, what are your symptoms? Like, do you meet the criteria for this diagnosis? And so therefore, what is the treatment? It's a very Western, pathologizing way of looking at the mind. And psychotherapy takes a little bit of a different approach. And in my experience, in my lived experience, both as a receiver of therapy and a clinician in psychotherapy, there is a shift that just makes so much sense when we start to understand that what we are experiencing is not something that is broken or wrong or deficient in us. Humans make sense given the context. And so, for example, we might say, okay, well, you have an anxiety disorder, right? And because you have the anxiety disorder, here are a bunch of coping mechanisms. Here's 12 sessions of CBT and off you go, right? In order to get you to this state of wellness. Psychotherapists, and we are curious, obviously, in how to move you out of there, but we spend a lot more time saying, well, why are you anxious? What has happened to you in your past where anxiety actually would make sense? Where being hypervigilant, where being trying to problem solve, trying to read people, trying to predict where things might go wrong, where may have that actually been a really adaptive and intelligent coping mechanism? Well, if you grew up in a house with a lot of violence, constantly being on edge, constantly being able to attune to people and get a sense of whether dad's had a good day or not, and whether I need to stay in my bedroom or whether I need to go and look after mum, that would be a really intelligent and creative adaptation that you made when you were younger. But now 20 years have passed and you've still got this this way of handling yourself and handling life that, like I said, at one point in that household made so much sense. But now that we're just, in a corporate office and our boss has called us in for a meeting, does not make as much sense. So it's a non-pathologizing approach. And if I was to reduce it down to 3 words, it would be, you make sense.
I love that. I love that. And I remember reading, is it Dr. Bruce Perry? He wrote that book with Oprah, What Happened to You? I think that's such a beautiful way that you framed it. It's looking at the why and, then leaning further into somatics. And we'll talk about this a little more in a moment. But what is the feedback? that your body is giving you. And rather than making it wrong or something that we need to fix, having that lens of curiosity to explore in a safe space and to invite in the feedback and the inner wisdom rather than constantly trying to, flatten it, fix it, push it away is so, so powerful. On that, and I'm gonna kind of thread this all together, so stay with me. What inspired you to become a yoga teacher?
Okay, we are doing the weave. What inspired me to be a yoga teacher? I think in the way that I knew I wanted to be a therapist when I was 11, I also knew that there was something to this yoga thing. I know that's probably quite an unsatisfying answer, but I remember driving past a yoga studio and there was an image of someone in a meditation seat. And something in my soul said, that just feels right. And I was young when I felt that. And my mum, again, in her infinite wisdom, being a single mum, when she decided to take us on our first international holiday, she was like, look, you guys live in Sydney. I could take you to Fiji or like Hawaii or somewhere beautiful, but you guys have so much privilege. You don't need to see more ease. What's actually going to help you is to see a little bit of hardship and give you a little bit of like perspective. And so she decided to take us to India. So I remember being 11 years old, landing in Delhi airport, and it was, oh my gosh, it was hot, it stunk, the poverty and it was rampant. I remember, people coming up to the car and banging on the doors. I was so scared and so overwhelmed. But whilst we were there, she took us to the River Ganges, which is a really holy river in India, and there was a Buddhist monastery. And again, I had that same feeling. I was like, oh, there's something to this Buddha guy. And I think I just followed that feeling. I just happened to work in a yoga studio doing admin when I was like 18. And I made friends with the head yoga teacher. And he was always like, you should do your training. And I was like, nah, year after year. And then one year he was just like, you're going to do it. And I was like, okay. And then it just made sense. And I fell in love with it. It felt like home. It felt like truth. It felt like an exhale. And it continues to feel that way. And I think when you study yogic philosophy, it is one and the same with so much modern psychotherapeutic teachings, especially around trauma. Like I remember I've been a yoga teacher for like nearly a decade. And when I went to do my trauma training, I was like, oh, this is yoga. Like you guys are just repackaging yoga. This is yoga.
Literally. That's what I've shared on this podcast many times, that when I did my teacher training, which was, I've been teaching for three and a bit years now, my jaw hit the floor when I realized the similarities between yoga philosophy and 12-step recovery.
Yes.
Like it blew my mind because it's basically just teaching you how to not be a shit human.
Yep.
Like it's designed for living in its essence. And, that's probably the same with a lot of spiritual texts that have been interpreted by different organizations and groups and bodies. But it never ceases to amaze me how incredible yogic philosophy is. And if everybody could just take a taste of it into their daily lives, the world would be a much better place. And so here's where I'm going to thread and tie this, put a little bow on this. So Rachel, how does your yoga teaching and experience as a yoga teacher inform your psychotherapy practice?
This is so dangerous of you to ask because we might be here for 4 hours. Like I could go on, but I will be brief.
Okay.
To sum it up, like I touched on before, oftentimes with trauma, as Gabor Mate says, it's not what happened to you, it's what happened inside of you. That we go through these experiences that just overwhelm our body. They overwhelm our nervous system. They we don't have the capacity to hold all of them. And so we make a very intelligent decision to move up from our body and start to live in our head. And it's intelligent in the short term, right? If I'm in so much pain and so overwhelmed, it's kind of like there's too many tabs open on the computer. My body just shuts that down and I go and live up in the safety of my head. And what yoga does and what trauma therapy does is it invites us to slowly come back down into our body. And again, here are the crossovers. One of the ways that we do that, for example, in somatic experiencing is with the idea of pendulation, which means that we go into a sensation that might be a little bit difficult. Like maybe we're touching on like the way the grief wraps around your throat, or the way the anxiety just feels like this tingliness in your belly. And then we come back into a sensation that feels good. Maybe I feel really relaxed in the seat behind me, or maybe my jacket feels really soft. And so I go in, I go out, I go in, I go out, so I don't flood my body and I start to build up capacity. Now, we do the same thing in yoga without even really knowing it, because there are some poses that will create activation, will kind of like upregulate us, and then there are some poses that will downregulate us. So if you think about an inversion or a back bending, very activating, like heart is racing. Also very vulnerable positions because you could fall out. Even like back bendings, we're exposing everything that's vulnerable, like my throat, my heart, my groin, my abdomen. So our body starts to go into this state of activation. And then what do we follow it with? A forward fold, where there is safety, where there is breath, where there is spaciousness. And so I'm giving my body a taste of activation, then I come back to safety, and taste of activation and come back to safety. And what we do is we start to build up our capacity to tolerate more suffering, more discomfort. One thing I do with my clients in therapy is I get them, this is so mean, I get them to sit in a toe sit.
Ooh,
which for those
spicy.
who don't know, it's like you tuck your toes underneath and you sit your bum on your heels, and like you're good for 10 seconds and then it's like fire in your feet. It's a really intense pose. And what I get them to do is I get them to watch the sensation, to watch the desire to react to the sensation, to learn that they have the capacity to feel discomfort without it being unsafe. And I think that any kind of physical movement can do this. You can do it in a sauna. You can do it with weight training. You can do it with ice baths. Lord knows you can do it with ice baths, where you start to learn that you have the capacity to feel more discomfort, which gives us mastery. Because I think that is at the heart of it. You know, I think the first noble truth of Buddhism is that life is suffering. Like suffering is built in to the contract in being a human. We don't get away from it. You know, our relationships will end. Our bodies will break down. Our jobs will come to an end. We'll no longer be able to do them. Everything is impermanent. And no one escapes this reality. So what do? Well, we learn to get good at suffering. We learn to suffer well. We learn to surf the waves rather than get drowned in them. I'm going to leave it there, girl, because I could just keep going. But
that was like, I was just like hanging on every word then. That was so beautiful. Learn to ride the waves of suffering rather than be drowned by them. So, so true. And that idea that, you know, the impermanence of life, and the more you hold on, it's like trying to hold on to sand, right? You know, if you hold on tightly, it's going to fall through your fingers. But if you can just gently bring your palms together, for those who aren't watching right now, I'm creating like a little bowl with my hands. You know, you can hold it. It's easy. It's spacious. So good, Rachel. Thank you. I have another curious question for you.
Okay.
Tell me, your husband, so you've mentioned this, your husband is also a psychotherapist and a yoga teacher. And you guys also do couples therapy counseling. How do you manage that? Because obviously you live together, you then work together. I imagine you guys share very similar interests. How do you navigate that? And how do you know when to switch off from work mode versus play?
I think it's an evolving dynamic, but also one that I think there is a surprising amount of ease. And I say surprising even to myself. I remember on our first date, so for context, he was my yoga teacher. That's how we met. Which
Oh,
was so
wow.
hot at the time. I was like, hell yeah, I get to get to go on a date with my yoga teacher. And on our first date, he was saying that he was studying psychology. Don't worry, I got him into psychotherapy straight away. But we very quickly knew that we had very aligned paths. And for both of us, this feels like our dharma. It feels obvious that not only is this what we want to do, it's just who we are. This is just like the fullest, most authentic expression of who we are. Like, there really is not much of a difference between therapist Rachel and normal Rachel. If I have time off, I'm the worst to have at parties. Like, I'm talking about therapy. My brother, I was at his wedding and he was like, you got to stop asking people about their childhood at like my reception. Like, this is not, and he would come over and we're talking, someone's just telling me how they started seeing a new therapist, and my brother would come over and he would hear like a little peek of our conversation. He's like, fuck this, I'm leaving. But what I'm trying to say is this work just feels wholehearted and obvious and really authentic. And he is very much so the same, that if we do what we love, we end up doing this. And so how do we find the balance? I think right now we don't, and we're okay with that. Like, we very much so, we spend a lot of our time in this world, in this area, talking about philosophy and therapy and yoga and stepping back and being very curious and inquisitive about all of it. And it feels, I think he is my husband, but he's also, just my best friend that I can dive into and say, I had this thought about moksha. And he's like, great, let's dive into it, So I think right now we both are very consumed in this, and we can meet each other in that kind of intensity. But we also do just play. We have, we travel a lot. We have dogs, which is my favorite thing. Like, we communicate to each other through the dogs. I don't know if you have animals and if you've created voices and personalities for them.
Yeah. He is literally my human son. He is my baby. Yep. Frank, he's a mascot of the show. Yes.
Okay, amazing. Because I have a Frank as well. Like, we have a dachshund, and she's essentially Cartman from South Park, and we speak to each other in her voice. Like, we're like, I'm not going to do the voice because that would be mortifying, but like, I will bully my husband through the dog. Like, I'll get the dog to say something mean to Bevan, or like our cavoodle Frankie. He's the sweetest, most little sensitive, like his Butterss from South Park. Like, he's just a sensitive little boy. Anyway, so we play. We have a lot of we joke. We go and see comedy. I love comedy. It's one of my favorite art forms. So I think we're still, right now we're totally in a vortex that is obsession, but I also trust that we're going to be able to navigate when that changes, and it will. He's really building his career right now. I'm really, as am I. We're really career focused at this point, but I also know that won't last. At some point, we'll be obsessed with kids, and we'll be obsessed with retirement. And
it's all just seasons. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Rachel. Your energy is so calming, and I think that is clear now that I understand where you've dedicated, the last decade of your life and your work, and it feels very authentic. I'm curious to know, and this might be a little vulnerable to answer, are there any messy moments? Are there any areas where things feel out of alignment, and how do you work through that?
I mean, yeah, yeah, for sure. One of my best friends is a therapist, and we so often joke like, fuck, how good would our life be if we took any of the advice that we give our clients? Because I think all of this work that we do with our clients, that we do with ourselves, it's aspirational, which means we're constantly moving towards it. It's all practices. We never arrive at self-regulation or arrive at, perfectly moving through our emotions or creating and cultivating a healthy relationship. It's something that we're constantly in the process of building and managing. And for sure, I have days where I'm shit at it. Like, when I'm tired, when I'm hormonal, when I've burnt myself out, for sure. I think the burnout was a really, one of my girlfriends called me out in the best way. She sent me a message, how are you? What's going on? And I was like, I'm so busy. And just, every weekend's booked up. Blah, blah, blah. And she just said to me, she's like, I love you, but same shit. And I was like, okay, yep, I needed that one.
Oh my gosh, like Rachel, I need someone to say that to me.
I'll give you her number. She's brutal.
Oh my gosh.
But it was, I think, realizing how much my burnout was affecting the people around me, particularly my husband, because I'm not fabulous to deal with when I'm dysregulated and overstimulated. I think that's been a real work in progress. But I also, I welcome it. I think a big part of this work is creating so much compassion for all parts of you, because all parts of you have wisdom. And that's not some kind of like fluffy peace, love, and light. Like, it's all beautiful. Like, it's just an objective truth. My anger is often pointing me to my values and my boundaries. My overstimulation is pointing me to my need for slowness and probably nature. My aggression is pointing me to a part of me that just feels so overwhelmed and so beyond capacity that I don't, my prefrontal cortex is switching off, whatever. But all of these parts of me, they have something to tell me if I'm willing to slow down and listen. So I get messy for sure, but I also welcome the mess. We love the mess. We love the insight that it brings.
Tell me, what did burnout actually look like for you? So you had your awesome friend who held the mirror up and was like, come on. But what was the physical manifestation of that for you, Rachel?
Very physically, it was just a lot of exhaustion. It was feeling like small things were too big. Like a girlfriend sending me a message being like, hey, can we catch up on Saturday? You may as well have asked me to write like a dissertation for some kind of astrophysics at Cambridge. Like, I was like, I cannot do this. So yeah, when I felt like it was too much, that's always a sign of burnout. Very just physically tired, like I haven't taken my iron supplement kind of thing. Like, it's just everything feels heavy and slow and exhausting. I get resentful and I get snappy when I'm burnt out. And also just like, not just, I was losing my hair. My hair was
wow. Yeah.
It was just my body was just under too much pressure. It didn't have the space and the time to heal. And like, it goes back to what I said earlier. Rest is not a luxury, it's a necessity. If your body doesn't have the time to heal, something's out of whack.
And what gives when you get to that point? Is it, because I'm literally here right now and I'm so curious to know. And literally get the text message come through and I'm like, I can't. I'm curious because we can't just say, well, I'm not going to work anymore, or I'm not. So is it, yeah, I'll just ask the question and not answer it. What is it?
I think it was sitting down really honestly with my values. Like, what is most important to me? And I very much so subscribe to the idea that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our relationships. Like, that's number one. And if teaching too many classes or seeing too many clients means that I'm a shit wife or I'm a distant friend, then I'm not living in alignment with my values. And so I think figuring out what really matters to you, like if you were to lose this, or if you were to get feedback from this thing that's saying you're kind of dropping the ball here, what would hurt? Like, if my friends started to say to me, and they didn't, my friends were always so understanding, but if they said, hey, I feel like I can't reach you, or I feel like, you don't put in enough effort, or, and my husband was saying like, hey, like, I hate it when you talk to me like that. Or I hate like that, being around that kind of snarky, tired energy. then that's enough for me to say, okay, well, what matters more, these extra classes or my relationship? And I think one thing that really hit me, and this is like when my therapist called me out, he was like, I guess in a way that my friend called me out, but probably less therapeutic. He was like, okay, well, you have designed your life, right? You've picked the work that you do. You love the work you do. Now take responsibility for it. Like, stop being like, I'm so tired. You're the one doing this. And that's good news. Because where we direct the blame is also where we direct the power. And if it's my fault, then I can do something about it. And so for me, that looked like really strict, like Sundays, I will not schedule anything. That being said, I have a rebirthing breathwork workshop coming up this Sunday, but for the most part, like I'm not going to take on covers. I'm going to try and not book people in. Like, it is my one day where I can just be, where I'm like, I've got nothing to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, do I want to walk the dogs? Maybe we'll figure it out when I get there. So I think giving myself that one day, and then also making hard decisions. Like, I love teaching, but I don't have capacity, so I've got to drop it. And there is just grief there, but I will pick that grief over the burnout. And I think we're constantly adjusting, like you so poignantly said, like life is all just a collection of seasons, and we adjust depending on what season we're in, trusting that the next season will flow in anyway.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I feel like I got a little bit of therapy there, so I'm feeling very lucky, and I do appreciate it. After the show, perfect. Yeah. Rachel, oh my God, this conversation, I can't describe it as anything other than delicious. I literally have loved every single moment. And there is one final question that I'd love to ask you as we come towards the end of our conversation here today. It's a question that we ask everyone who joins us here on the show. And it's around this idea of stepping out from behind the smile and how we continue to do that on a daily basis. So, Rachel, would you be able to share with me what would be your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Number 1 would be a few quality relationships. Like, I love my husband, but my girls, like, that's my everything. Like, it is 15-minute voice notes back and forth, like, deep dives, but also then we're talking about the Kardashians. Like, my friends are my oxygen, and they keep me going. And I think making sure I carve out time for these relationships that feel so nourishing and so important is a non-negotiable for me. Movement, non-negotiable. I think once you have some kind of movement practice, no matter what it is, one of the downfalls is like you feel what it feels like when you don't do it. I don't know if I articulated that very well, but once you have mobility and flexibility in your body, and you know what it's like to have like a strengthened posterior chain, you feel the pain of not having that, the discomfort of not looking after your body. So movement in any form, you know, I'm not attached. I love yoga. I love Pilates. I'm loving surfing lately. I love walking my dogs. Like, I'm just moving in any way that just feels intuitively good. My last one would be like full breaths. I think I've been really diving into breath work. Last year I did 26 sessions in 6 months, which was like, it was a lot. But I think it gave me an appreciation for this inbuilt medicine we have, this capacity to nourish ourselves, to take ourselves through the layers of the body. And so I think when I learned how to breathe, like really like breathe into my back, breathe into my belly, non-negotiable. We love like a good, like, yeah.
Heaven. I love it. What a perfect way to end the conversation here today. Rachel, we say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one need suffer in silence. So thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge, all of it. It's been such a joy, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for holding the space. I mean, I think, I've been on podcasts before, and it's such a co-creation. I think there's something about your energy and your energy that just feels so inviting and so safe. So thank you for being that for me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You have a beautiful rest of your evening, and I'll hope to speak to you soon. Bye, Rachel.